Hey guys, so tonight we're talking about a train that, by all accounts, shouldn't exist. You know how some urban legends feel too specific to be made up? Like the kind of story that has just enough paperwork behind it to make you wonder if someone, somewhere really did try to file a missing person report about it? Yeah, this is one of those. So if you haven't already, go ahead and dim the lights, maybe get that weird tea that smells faintly of dust and regret, and settle in. Because tonight, we're going back to the age of iron, soot, and insomnia to follow what people once called the midnight train. The story goes that this particular train appeared only at 3 o'clock in the morning. Always 3, never 2:59, never 3:05. And if you got on board, well, no one ever saw you again. Which is a bit of an inconvenience for historians, because it makes verifying any of this rather difficult. The railway age of nightmares. Let's drift back to around 1883, the height of what the Victorians called railway mania. Trains were the cutting-edge marvel of the modern world. Loud, grimy, and fast enough to terrify anyone who'd grown up thinking the horse was the peak of technology. It was an era when people built railways everywhere, sometimes even where no one needed to go. Towns competed to have stations, as though a stop on the map meant civilization had finally arrived. Of course, many of those towns immediately went bankrupt afterward, but never mind. Progress. And with all that rapid progress came something else. Superstition. Because humans are nothing if not consistent. We invent something brilliant, then immediately assume it's haunted. There were dozens of stories floating around by the 1880s. Trains that carried the dead, trains that whistled with no driver. Even one, my personal favorite, about a phantom luggage train that apparently kept circling northern England, eternally delayed, which frankly sounds like most of British rail service even today. But the midnight train was different. This one didn't just haunt the rails. It seemed to choose its passengers. The first rumors. The first recorded mention, or at least the first one we can pretend is real for the sake of the story, comes from a half-forgotten issue of the Derbyshire Times in March of 1884. It's one of those short filler columns newspapers used to print when nothing else was happening, right between a story about a goose that laid an egg shaped like Queen Victoria's face and a stern editorial about chimney sweeps. It reads, and I quote, "A curious event was observed at the old Winsford station this past fortnight. Several local persons report a train arriving at the 3rd hour of morning, absent from any scheduled service, and departing thence without visible staff nor manifest. The station porter, having approached, claims the air grew cold as in a vault, and that the engine gave forth a sound like human voices weeping. Authorities have declined to investigate." Now, no one ever found this porter. His name apparently was Thomas Belcher, a name so aggressively Victorian it's hard to believe it wasn't made up by Charles Dickens in a rush. But his supposed testimony is the one that gave the legend its first foothold. From then on, you start seeing whispers, letters to editors, barroom anecdotes, even a few railway company memos written in the most British way possible, trying to deny something without actually saying the word ghost. One note from the Great Midland Line simply said, "Staff are reminded that trains operate only upon posted timetables and that no vehicles exist scheduled at the 3rd hour." Which is corporate speak for please stop scaring the customers. Passengers who didn't come home. So what exactly was supposed to happen when people boarded it? Accounts vary. Some say the train was ordinary in appearance, a bit dusty, maybe older than it should have been, but otherwise fine. Others claim it looked off. Windows darker than they should be, the headlamp burning a cold blue-white instead of the usual golden glow of coal fire. And then there's the matter of the tickets. Several versions say the conductor, always described as tall, thin, and wearing a hat too big for his head, would appear from the mist beside the platform and quietly offer you a ticket. The ticket was one way, always one way, and printed with a destination no one could quite read, something like Brackenmere Halt, or End Line, or in one particularly dramatic retelling, simply Home. And because Victorians were curious to a fault, some people took it. They stepped aboard, sat down, maybe heard the whistle blow once, and were never seen again. Now, of course, there are simpler explanations. Runaways, for one. The late 19th century was full of young people disappearing to London for work or to avoid it. But the coincidence, the timing, kept the myth alive. Always 3 a.m, always in some fog-drenched, out-of-the-way sighting, and always with that faint metallic echo, like something old and hollow sighing down the track. What the records say and don't say. Let's float over for a minute to railway archives, because I know that's where you wanted to spend your evening. Most railway records of the time were meticulous. Schedules, staff rosters, rolling stock numbers. But here's the weird part. There actually are occasional blank spots. Entire pages where a train number is missing, or a route listed but crossed out. Now, these omissions aren't mysterious on their own. Sometimes a train was canceled, or a clerk spilled ink, or someone just stopped caring mid-Thursday. But certain rail historians have noted that many of these little gaps line up with stories of unexplained departures. The London and North Western Railway had at least 3 documented lost carriages, meaning trains that left the yard but never arrived where they were supposed to. Usually the explanation was mundane, a clerical error, a derailment in the countryside, or an accounting trick. But in one 1887 case, the company's own board minutes mention a nocturnal, unscheduled passage through the Garsden Junction, and note that investigation proved inconclusive. Translation: something weird happened and no one wanted to lose their pension over it. The human element. As with most ghost stories, what makes the midnight train believable isn't the train itself, it's the people who swore they saw it. There's a diary entry from 1891, written by a schoolteacher named Margaret Elwell, who lived near a small station outside Nottingham. She writes, "Awakened by the whistle at the 3rd hour once more, so clear and near that I rose to the window but saw only the garden gate standing open. I'm certain the station has been shut these 10 years. The air smelled of coal smoke and lilies." Coal smoke and lilies, which sounds poetic but also deeply concerning. A month later, she stopped writing altogether. Her landlord noted she'd gone to relatives in Leicester, though none were ever found. You can see how stories like this basically wrote themselves. And in a way, they kept spreading because the railway companies tried so hard to suppress them. Nothing makes people believe in a myth quite like a sternly worded memo saying it isn't real. By 1902, the midnight train had become such a fixture in folklore that postcards were being sold depicting a ghostly locomotive under a crescent moon. Some even had fake ticket stubs attached. Tourists loved it, the rail companies hated it. And at least one clergyman, according to a sermon in Yorkshire, declared that the devil rides the iron road at ungodly hours. Which sounds like an early heavy metal lyric, honestly. Industrial ghosts and other theories. Now let's talk theories, because no self-respecting bedtime historian leaves you hanging without at least 3 half-baked explanations. Theory 1. It was all a metaphor. Victorian writers loved to personify industry, machines as monsters, engines as devourers of men. So maybe the midnight train was just an artistic way of talking about how industrial progress was swallowing up human lives. After all, thousands died building those tracks. Every mile of rail was practically mortared with soot and regret. So maybe the legend was a way of saying the machine doesn't stop, even if you do. Theory 2. Time slips. Yes, that old chestnut. Some believers claim the midnight train wasn't supernatural, but temporal, a kind of accidental time loop caused by overlapping railway lines and, I don't know, residual Victorian gloom? The idea is that the train wasn't taking passengers to the afterlife, just to another time. Which, to be fair, in the 1880s might have been the same thing.
And finally, the third theory, bureaucratic cover-up. Because if there's one thing the British Empire did almost as well as colonization, it was paperwork. And if some unsanctioned experiment with new locomotive technology went wrong, say an early electrical engine that accidentally vaporized its passengers, they'd absolutely bury it in red tape. After all, you can't lose people on a train that officially never existed. The modern sightings. Fast forward a century or so. By the 1980s, the legend had mostly faded except for the occasional late-night radio caller insisting they'd heard a whistle with no source somewhere near an abandoned track. But then came the internet, and with it, forums. And, well, you know how that goes. People started sharing encounters, stories of waiting for the 3 a.m. bus and hearing a distant metallic hum, of station clocks freezing at 3 precisely, even CCTV clips, usually grainy enough to be a toaster commercial, showing what looks like a single light gliding through the fog. Of course, 99% of these can be explained by normal trains, camera glitches, or someone being bored at 2:58 a.m. But one clip, posted in 2009 from a decommissioned station in Yorkshire, shows something oddly consistent with the old accounts. A single beam of cold light, a shadowed outline of an engine that doesn't match any known model, and, faintly, if you turn the volume all the way up, the sound of people talking. Or maybe it's just the wind. Either way, it's not exactly soothing bedtime material, but you're here, so we might as well keep going. A pause before we continue. So that's where we'll leave the track for now, just long enough to refill your tea and question your life choices. When we come back, we'll drift deeper into the archives, meet a few unfortunate railway employees who got a bit too close to the legend, and see how one early 20th century scientist decided to take the whole haunted train thing way too seriously. Because apparently, even ghosts can't resist the lure of modern innovation. Take a breath, stretch a bit, and when you're ready, we'll step back aboard.